fiction, science fiction, horror, fantasy, crime, LGBT, thriller.
You have now entered the House of Mystery.
Well, welcome back into the House of Mystery. I'm Al Warren. Mr. Joe Goldberg is in the house.
I'm in the house.
Just
I'm
barely.
enjoying being inside. Just barely, that's true.
Just barely.
Playing son-in-law, husband, grandfather all at the same time. Go, oh my gosh.
Yeah.
My alarm went off. I got to go talk to Al.
Truth, everyone's chasing you around. I know what's going on here.
Yes.
Wanted by the law.
I'm wanted. I've never shoplifted though, but
No, well, I mean, I know, but you've done all sorts of bad things. So.
I've done bad things under different names.
Under different names.
Yes. I had like 6 aliases at one time. That was a fun time. Who the hell am I?
Yeah, that would be good. As long as you don't have 6 wives and 6, that's another story. Anyway.
How do you know?
Well, you got to write a book then.
Well, we have a real book writer with us today.
We have a real author.
Not like me. Yeah. I think they're called authors. I like to call them book writers. That makes me I'm a wordsmith. Them book writers.
Yeah. So let's see. We're talking about the book called The Return of Ellie Black. It's a novel. And Emiko Jean, thank you for being here.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So let's start out with first how you got into writing. Like what drew you into the writing world?
Well, I think like most writers, I was and still am a pretty prolific reader. Although now that I am an official author, I read less and less, which is kind of a hazard of becoming a writer. But yeah, I mean, I loved reading when I was younger. I would go to the library. My mom was a reading specialist, and, the rule was you can check out as many books as you can carry. And I remember just, my arms being heavy as we walked through the parking lot of the library. And I just loved getting lost in books. I didn't come to writing, I guess, some would call it later in life. I mean, I was like 35, which doesn't feel that old to me, but I pursued other careers beforehand. When I was younger, I'm Japanese American, and I had never really seen a Japanese American character in any of the books that I had read, nor had I read any books that were written by Japanese American authors. So I think subconsciously I felt kind of shut out from writing. I didn't really consider it a career opportunity because there wasn't a reflection of myself in what I was reading. And so it took me a little while to kind of find that I was really creatively inclined and that I wanted to write. I was working a really terrible job that I was unhappy at. And I remember I would pretend to send emails, but I'd start writing chapters into a book. And that's eventually kind of what led me down to being more serious about writing and trying to get an agent and all that kind of stuff.
Do you want to name the job, and then we can...
Yeah, let's say. This is for you, Fred.
They might, I don't know. I don't want them to, I feel like I owe them money. I was on their clock, and I was writing, I wrote a whole novel. I was working there, so, yeah.
Oh, good job.
I like it. I was a screenplay in the government. Yeah, don't tell them.
Yeah.
How did you pick genre? Did you know going in I was a young adult or whatever? Adult or
That's what I was reading at the time. And that's what kind of, and I was working with a lot of young adults too. I worked in youth education. So that felt really natural to me. And I started with, I think I wrote it was when Twilight came out, I started writing kind of a fantasy novel, and then it was really bad. So I shelved it. And then I really had always enjoyed thrillers. And so that was my debut young adult novel, was a young adult thriller, which I think it's out of print now. I'm not sure.
Is there a way to write young adult? I mean, is there a style? I've never written it. So is there a style?
I think it has to do with the voice and, the theme. A lot of them are coming of age stories, kind of like identity shaping stories. And so it has to, of course, and your protagonist should be, under the age of 18, usually with young adults, usually ages like 14 to 18.
Oh yeah. Joe can't remember back then.
Yeah, and I had a line too, but I thought it might be inappropriate for the radio. You have to edit that one out, but I didn't want the police to knock on your door.
Mm-hmm.
Back when Joe was 18, they didn't have books.
That's true.
Yeah, there's definitely a craft to writing young adult, and like I said, there's just there's different themes that are more appropriate for young adult, and different themes that and topics that are appropriate for adult fiction.
How do you stay current then with what young adults like 18? Because you're not 18 anymore, right? So
yeah.
How do you stay up to date?
Barely.
Well, I know it. She seems so young.
Seems.
Well, I'm trying to be nice.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
but
I'm 42.
Well, see, there
I'm
you
42.
go.
I'm 43. I feel like I've gotten. I always have to kind of do the math now to see what year I'm at, but I'm 42, and yeah. So I'm far away from 18 from being in high school. I read young adult literature still. I have nieces and nephews, but I think there are some things that are timeless with the young adult experience. Like I said, those coming of age stories, like the pulp culture references change, but the struggles tend to remain, the same.
So let's talk about the premise of this book. What's the basic storyline here of the return of Ellie Black?
The Return of Ellie Black is kind of the classic missing girl narrative. It's a story. The story begins with Chelsey Calhoun. She's a small town Japanese American police detective, and she receives a phone call that Ellie Black, a teen that went missing more than 2 years ago without leaving a trace, has mysteriously resurfaced in the woods of Washington State. And now Chelsey finally has a chance to solve a cold case that has never stopped haunting her. But even though Ellie is no longer in harm's way, Chelsey's investigation is anything but open and shut. She has far more questions than answers, and questions like who took Ellie Black and why won't Ellie talk about her experience? And as Chelsey digs deeper into Ellie's history and her recent behavior, which seems very suspicious, Chelsey runs headlong into demons of her own, unresolved grief over her murdered sister, and the subsequent fracturing of her family. The novel is told primarily from Chelsey's point of view, along with flashes of perspectives from those close to Ellie. And then you also get a firsthand account from Ellie herself about what happened those 2 years she was missing. At its core, the book is about family secrets and survival and how to find hope after trauma.
When you were writing this, was the Japanese American communities over your shoulder? Were you thinking about them, about the response of that community as you were writing it?
I mean, no, that wasn't as much a consideration in this book as it was in other books that I've written. I've tried to be really intentional about my writing, with the exception of my first young adult book, which had a white protagonist, to feature Japanese people or Japanese Americans at the forefront. And I just really wanted to create, with this book, a hero. Chelsey also works in a very small town called Coldwell, which is actually based on a very real town in Washington. And I thought I wanted to make her twice the outcast. So she's been adopted, she's Japanese American, and the majority of her community is white. And she's also the only female in her precinct. So I wanted to really make her kind of outside of the community that she was working in.
So how do you experience Chelsey, like when you're writing the book, and do you hear her? Do you see her? Is it like a movie? What kind of a relationship do you have?
Yeah, I mean, I felt her when I was, writing her. And I want to make it clear, too, that, she is Japanese American, but it's not necessarily a book about her being Japanese American. It's a lens through which, she views the world and experiences the world. But her passion is more in finding missing girls and being a champion for victims. And that's really where I felt her was, like I said, kind of as this hero who kind of takes on these cases that people don't want to take on.
Is there a reason why you chose her to be a detective and you're doing it from that angle?
Yeah, that always felt really natural to me. I don't remember consciously making that choice. Like when she appeared to me, she was a detective. Her father was a police chief. And so I kind of had this family legacy that I built around her that she was going to follow. And I'm trying to think if she would have worked as a character, as just an amateur detective. And I'm not sure if she would have worked in the same way.
Well, the obligatory podcast question would be, how did you learn about being a detective? Where did you go to find out that information?
Oh, I interviewed a lot of detectives. They asked to remain anonymous. I wanted to include them in the acknowledgments, but they were like, no thanks.
Except for Frank.
Yeah.
You pissed me off.
I interviewed a lot of detectives, to kind of just figure out, kind of how their minds work, but then also a lot of the logistical side of police work, which I didn't have a great understanding of. And it was really fascinating to hear their stories. I also was fortunate enough to interview an FBI agent who was a family friend who was at Ruby Ridge. And he had some really fascinating stories, and he actually became the inspiration point for another character in the novel, Detective Montoya, who shows up later on and helps Chelsey with the case. But he was really fascinating, and his stories were so interesting that I was like so inspired by him that I added this like extra new character after I had almost finished the book.
And you said you had a chapter of the victim as well, or you wrote one point of view from being kidnapped for a while. How did you get into that mindset?
That was more research, more interviews. I read a lot of memoirs. So the inspiration behind the book was essentially about, was drawn from stories about kidnapped victims that have returned, like J.C. Duggart and Elizabeth Smart and Amanda Berry, and reading their stories. I was careful not to use any of their stories, so I didn't want to co-opt anyone's experiences because, that's not right. But I was mostly interested in, kind of learning about the endurance of the human spirit.
So it sounds like you really planned this out. You thought this out even before you were writing the book, actually, or just at the beginning. Did you have a point? Did you have kind of a subtext then that you were kind of hoping readers would pick up?
Yeah, there's and I don't think this is too spoilerish, but in the last line, in one of the final chapters, there's a line about Ellie, who's our kidnapped victim who returns. And she says that she'll learn to, carry grief in one hand and hope in the other. And that was kind of like the big banner across my office wall while I was writing, because that's what I, always intended for her character arc to be. For me, when I'm writing, I figure out, the starting place of my character and where I want them to end up. And so Ellie was always like the heart of the novel. And I always knew where she was beginning as kind of this broken girl and where I wanted to take her by the end of the book.
Well, as you're creating the kidnapped victim stories and the rest of the things underneath it, were there things that you said, I better not put that in the book? That's, self-censoring or canceling yourself. You want to use it.
Yeah, I mean, there was a question once as I was getting into later drafts of the book and my agent was reading, and there are some pretty hard scenes to read. And she said, do you want to include these, or do you think this is like too graphic? Do you feel like this is exploitive? And I thought about it for a long time. And I remember I had spoken to a group of victims beforehand, and one of them had said, there's kind of this urge to gentle the truth for people. And I decided intentionally then to like make Ellie's voice as raw as possible, because it was important for her to tell her story and for it not to be gentled. And then I added in a line about, from Chelsea's perspective, about how someone, has to kind of bear witness to these crimes. And that's Chelsea's burden, and her job is to bear witness and to catalog these things, and then, to help weed out these people that perpetrate these crimes.
That's a good answer. I scribbled a note here. Gentle the truth. I like to steal that one. I'm stealing that one.
Yeah. Yeah.
Joe interviews because when he's writing a book, he always wants to,
Yeah,
it's
I
all
would
about
too.
him.
I would too.
Yeah. Just so you know, it's all about Joe.
It's all about me, guys.
Yeah.
I asked the question. I'm writing a female lead first person character for the first time. Mm-hmm. And I've said this quote many times, the Terry Pratchett world of, I'm not writing a female or a woman, I'm writing a person. Mm-hmm. How do you approach writing different characters who are not Japanese American or white males or whatever? What is your thought on that?
That's a good question, because there is a perspective in the book that's from Ellie's father. And so you only get like 2 or 3 chapters of it, but it was also like the most difficult perspective to write, because I'm not a male, I'm not a father, and he's a fishing guy. He's spent a long time out on the water. And it was again, research and interviews. And so I found a guy that had spent his life fishing tuna, and I spent a day with him on the boat, and I learned his life story. I learned about the town that he grew up in, and that kind of helped me kind of mold Jimmy, who's Ellie's father, into the character that I needed him to be for the book.
So your research is really out there. You're not Googling internet people. You're actually going talking to them face to face.
I think it's important to to spend time with people, because that's where you really pick up a lot of like mannerisms. It's just the stories that you hear. I think it's so unique. And that's all. Please forgive me, because that's also why in the book there's like a 2-page like description about how tuna fishing works. It's like, this is tuna, I'm going to put it in the book. but I think those things are invaluable, as having, a face-to-face interaction with someone. And people tend to open up more too when you're kind of right there and you're engaged with them and you're looking them in the eye. And I think it makes a world of difference. But I mean, I do the book research and all that kind of stuff, but I really try to get out there into the field.
Yeah, I agree. When I write true crime, and when I have people involved, like the cops and the victims and all that stuff, it makes a much better story than when I don't.
There's just so much texture. There's so much texture, and that emotion, it's in the room with you and it balloons. Especially when I was talking to detectives and to victims, you just can't replicate that. You try to replicate it in writing, but you can't, replicate it when you're reading just a book or a memoir or something like that. It's so much more heavy when you're in the room with someone.
Yeah. You pick up a lot of things that you can't pick up through a book. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Thinking about it, you kind of see like their eyes dart or something, and then you can ask them to kind of go into it a little bit more. And so those little telltale flickers, you just can't do. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You can pick up subtleties, like what kind of throws them or what upsets them in different ways than without, Differences, of course, the police that I've been involved with, they're all mentioned in the book.
Yeah.
And usually your hands are handcuffed behind your back. But that's
No, I actually had one even write a chapter, one that arrested a serial killer, because he was so involved from beginning to end. I even said, well, listen, just write a little section here from you,
Yeah.
And, it just adds a little, that's all.
Yeah, I think it just depends on what they're comfortable with. And these were all detectives that, I don't know if your guy was like actively working in the field, but they were, investigating crimes and things like that. So they didn't want their identities. They felt that it might jeopardize some of their investigations, which I totally understood.
Right. Yeah, my last guy, that he had just retired. So I think it was a better place to be in, I think, for a cop and stuff. So what do you get out of writing books? How does it make you feel? Like, what is it that you get from these?
Yeah. I get very emotionally invested in the books that I write. And so I always describe it like a little bit like an exorcism. Like I'm kind of like, it's cathartic for me. And so I think that's why I really like, the linchpin for me is like that emotional piece. So writing, in The Return of Ellie Black, there's a lot of discussion about trauma, which I've always really been interested in. And you can kind of see a thread through other work that I've done that includes trauma too. I feel like it's kind of releasing something inside of me.
Right. It's kind of therapeutic in a way.
It is. Yeah, it is. I find it really, exhausting, but at the same time compulsive too, especially when you're in those like early stages of the draft. And, revision is kind of a different thing. It's kind of its own beast, but when you're first drafting, it's really exciting. There's not quite another feeling like it.
So what makes a good book for you? What do you like to read?
I like to read, the emotional books. So I do love thrillers, but, they have to have a real heart to them. I want to be attached to the characters. I want to know the characters' stories. And I want to be, like taken on a journey. And it doesn't really matter. I skip around in genre too. So I'll read young adult, I'll read romance, I'll read thrillers, I'll read true crime. The character just really has to draw me in.
So the characters are, I think, the most important. That's what people come back to.
Mm-hmm.
Are you gonna continue this character on in other books, do you think?
Yeah. So I actually just finished, and it's overdue now because I think I was supposed to have this in like a couple months ago. But we do follow Chelsey Calhoun, into a new crime, new case, new partner. So she's done with Ellie Black, but she takes on, a new murder. So we'll see her again in a second book.
And so your accessory, your smaller characters, where do you find them? Are they people at the coffee shop that you've seen or heard? Or
Yeah, I pick up on conversations.
No.
I do. And it's funny, you never know when it's going to come into play. Sometimes I don't intentionally catalog something, but then I find, I'll pluck something from something that happened a week ago. I take a lot of notes on my phone, and sometimes I'll even wake up at night and take notes. And for this new book that I'm starting to work on, I have like 70,000 words of notes to go through. But there's all like little snippets of dialogue or like character traits. Some of it doesn't make sense and I'll end up erasing probably a lot of it. But yeah, you you can find characterizations pretty much anywhere. I think, yeah.
Yeah. You just go out to the mall and hang for a while. Go to the food court. There's always lots of entertainment there, boy.
I think I remember I told, actually that's so funny. I had forgotten about this, but the first chapter of Ellie Black I wrote in a mall. I sat down and it's I think it's like 2 or 3 pages. It's the prologue, but I remember writing that down and people were kind of whizzing by me and there were all these shoppers and I was in the forest with this like missing girl running through the woods. Yeah.
Causing a scene in the food court. Security has to show up. Yeah, say calm down.
Well, there's something there though about the phone noting, because I do that too. So I was just at lunch with my sister-in-law was in town. She said something. I go, oh, that is the opening sentence of a type. I have a first lines folder on my phone, and I have an idea. You know, but to not wait, right? To not say, oh, I'll remember that.
No, you don't ever remember it, I feel like. And because I've tried before to be like, well, I'll remember it, but you lose it if you don't write it down.
Yeah, that's true. Only problem is when it's happening when you're driving, because that happens to me when I'm driving. And,
oh, text while you drive.
Yeah, well, no, I don't. I'm not supposed to. There you go. And I still haven't got into the voice thing, where you talk to your phone and it.
Oh yeah, I couldn't ever get into that either.
It just doesn't seem right. I'm sitting in the car talking to myself and I'm driving. I should just walk down the street and do that because then I'd fit right in. Talking to myself, that is.
Yeah.
Anyway, so listen, let's talk about your social media, website, and all that stuff. How do readers find you? Yeah,
so Instagram is my thing. I don't post really too much on Facebook, and I'm no longer on Twitter, which I think is now called, it's X now or something. I find Instagram to be like the safest place to be on social media. So people can find me. I think my handle is like Emiko Jean Books at Emiko Jean Books there. And then my website is the same, emikojean.com.
Fantastic. Of course, we'll put all that up on our website too, so people can find it and that. Do you like to interact with readers and fans, and do you get into the reviews and things like that, or do you stay away from all that side?
I stay away from certain things like Goodreads. I don't really wander into, but if someone tags me in something on Instagram, I'll see it and I'll usually respond. And and if someone has questions about books and things like that, I'll most usually respond.
Kind of a good idea, interact.
Yeah.
But
it's nice. It's nice. You never really know. I think writing is it's a lonely thing sometimes. So when you never know how a book is going to be received, and it's so nice to kind of get those messages that someone made a connection with something in your book. So I always really try to honor those and write back.
Do you beta read your book?
I don't. I am squirrely and private and suspicious. So
honey, is that you?
I don't even let my I will tell my agent a brief one-liner and then I write the whole book and I send it. I've also had some things where I signed 2 book contracts where I don't sometimes don't know what I'm going to write next, and those have kind of bitten me in the rear end, so I don't do that either anymore. I'm pretty private. I don't know why, but yeah.
Well, I'm doing it this time because I want to have my daughter and my wife, daughters, everybody read my character just to know if I'm on the right track. And they've been telling me, no, she wouldn't do that. And it's because I need to learn.
Yeah.
I've never done it before either. It's really disquieting.
Yeah, it's good, but it's I remember when I was writing Jimmy's point of view, it's I really enjoyed it. Someone asked me what was the favorite, thing from this book. And I said, writing this guy's point of view. And they were like, are you serious? Because he was kind of a minor character. And I was like, well, I found it to be kind of the most challenging too. So I think that is why I kind of had the most fun with it as well.
Yeah, but you connect with the same, with, let's say, a character who you obviously aren't, like the male, like Jimmy. You're not that person. When you're writing them and you're in their frame of mind and head and you're doing it as compared to writing Chelsey, for instance.
Yeah.
Do you have the same connection? Is it the same sort of interaction when you're writing?
No, it's not. I felt like Chelsey. I felt like I could be her. With Jimmy, I never really felt like I could be him, but I had a great deal of, I liked him a lot. I had a great deal of regard for him. And that's why I think I enjoyed writing him so much.
Well, what happens when you do a character that you don't like, that you absolutely can't stand?
Yeah, I mean, that's hard too. I think it's important to, I mean, because I did, I have antagonists, I have villains in books, and I think it's important. You don't necessarily have to like them, but you have to understand their motivations, and that seems, that seems to be enough for me, at least.
Yeah, just talk to Joe when you're writing someone bad again, and
yeah,
I'm here to help. Anything you do to help, let me know.
Yeah,
Good or bad.
Yeah,
I'll take you down.
Can pick it all up, you get a good feeling there. Anyway. Well, we appreciate you being here. The book is out now, The Return of Ellie Black. It's a novel. Emiko Jean, thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciated the chat.
Thank you.
This has been a production of the House of Mystery Radio Show. To find out more about our show, guests, or hosts, go to our website at houseofmysteryradio.com.